Papoose, you have my lawyer's information. If you can't afford to retain a lawyer, since your lawyer that the number you gave us has not been retained yet, I told you I'll paper it. If somebody over there that loves you wants to paper it, great. That will make me happy. Everything is signed and ready to go. I don't want nothing. I'm not even asking for child support. My daughter's school, her babysitter, her nanny, her gymnastics, her swimming, her dancing, her healthcare, her all of that. I take care of it like I've always done. I don't need anything.
I just like to express this one thing. All these girls be like, thank you to my man. And I want to say, to my hands, thank you to my hands. To my hands, thank you to my hands. Listen, for me knowing how to fight and me training hard, I make millions of dollars just from beating people up. So, to my hands, thank you to my hands. To my hands, thank you to my hands.
What you just heard sounds powerful on the surface. A woman saying she doesn't need anything. No money, no child support, no help. But statements like that don't appear in a vacuum. Because when someone repeatedly insists they are independent, self-sufficient, and untouched by outside influence, it usually means a different story is already circulating behind the scenes. A story that requires correction. A narrative that needs to be controlled before it hardens into public belief. Clarissa Shields wants the world to know she stands on her own hands, literally and financially. And there's no question she's earned her success. But strength doesn't cancel contradiction. And confidence doesn't erase context. What complicates this story is not what Clarissa says. It's why she feels compelled to say it so forcefully. Because this isn't just about money. It's about positioning. About distancing herself from assumptions people are already making about her relationship with Papoose. This is where things stop being simple. Because while Clarissa presents herself as untouched by dependency, the timeline of her connection with a married man tells a far more tangled story. One filled with mixed signals, blurred boundaries, and carefully chosen words. A story where emotional access appears before clarity. Where explanations change depending on who is watching. And where one woman speaks as if another woman no longer exists. At the center of it all is a man who never publicly defines the situation, yet benefits from every version of it. This is not a story about clout. It's not a story about jealousy. And it's not about who makes more money. It's a story about emotional imbalance, selective truth, and how silence can be just as strategic as speech. And once you look closely, the cracks become impossible to ignore.
My man like a king. Don't ever get it messed up, baby. I may have the muscles and I may know how to fight, but I'm very submissive to my man because my man's a good man. And he takes very good care of me.
At the center of this story is a contradiction that never quite resolves itself. Clarissa Shields has repeatedly stated that she does not lie for clout. That truth always comes out. That she has no reason to fabricate, exaggerate, or distort reality because her achievements speak for themselves. On paper, that sounds reasonable. But public credibility isn't measured by confidence alone. It's measured by consistency. And that's where the cracks begin to show. Because when you line up Clarissa's statements across time, platforms, and contexts, the story doesn't move forward in a straight line. It bends, it adjusts, and sometimes it quietly rewrites itself. The first version of events was simple, harmless, even. Papoose was just a fan. A brief interaction. A handshake. A compliment about her beauty. That was the narrative presented publicly, a chance encounter, nothing more. But later, details emerged that complicated that framing. Clarissa herself acknowledged that she was the one who initiated direct contact. She was the one who reached out privately. She was the one who offered VIP tickets. That alone changes the dynamic. Because that's no longer passive admiration. That's access. Intentional access. And access always carries implication. At that point, this stops being about a fan moment and starts becoming about emotional proximity. Not a relationship yet, but a door opening. And once that door opens, boundaries matter more than ever. This is where Clarissa's explanations begin to collide with documented reality. One of her most repeated claims is that she could not see Papoose because he was with his family and child. That she was not allowed. That circumstances, not choices, kept them apart. But those statements do not exist in a vacuum. Because long before Clarissa entered the picture, boundaries had already been established, not by rumor, not by fans, but within the marriage itself. Remy Ma had publicly and privately made it clear that their child does not spend time alone at the family house without her presence. If the child is there, Remy is there. If Papoose is with the child, it is typically within Remy's household. That matters. It means the idea that Clarissa was blocked because of a child arrangement doesn't align with how that family structure actually functions. Which raises a question Clarissa never directly answers. If Papoose was unavailable, who exactly was he unavailable with? That question becomes more uncomfortable when Clarissa later attempts to clarify the situation herself, stepping into the comments, pushing back on what she calls misinformation. She states that Papoose was with his mother and family, that people are assuming things that aren't true. But then comes the contradiction. Because other timelines suggest that Papoose was, in fact, with Remy Ma, even if only briefly. And that detail changes everything. Because Clarissa does something subtle, but telling at that point. She begins referring to Remy as an ex-wife. That is not a neutral mistake. It's a psychological one. Because legally, socially, and factually, Remy Ma was still Papoose's wife. No finalized divorce. No public separation announcement at that time. The label ex wasn't a legal reality, it was a mental one. And when someone mentally removes a spouse from the equation before reality does, disappointment becomes inevitable. At this point in the story, the internet begins doing what it always does, filling in gaps. Some theories suggest manipulation. Others suggest mutual benefit. A few even claim that Clarissa was being used by both sides. But those theories fall apart under scrutiny. Both women are financially independent. Both have their own platforms, income, and public standing. There is no incentive for a coordinated scheme. No material advantage gained through deception. What remains isn't strategy, it's imbalance. And imbalance is far more dangerous. Clarissa appears emotionally invested in a way that Papoose does not publicly reciprocate. She speaks in emotional terms. He remains largely silent. She defends. He benefits. She explains. He allows. And that silence, that absence of clarification, becomes its own form of control.
That's why I said I love him. I love having his support, you know what I'm saying? His support is like very, very different from what I've had in the past, and how he speaks to me and stuff is very different. There you go. We deserve each other.
This is where the tone shifts, because that statement isn't about love. It isn't about clarity. It's about closure, forced closure. The kind that dismisses questions instead of answering them. By calling it old, the implication is that the audience is late. That curiosity itself is inappropriate. But timelines don't expire just because someone says they should. And notice what's missing here. There is no confirmation, no definition, no ownership of overlap. Just emotional minimization. A suggestion that everyone should move on, even though the situation was never publicly resolved to begin with. When people rush to declare happiness without explaining the transition, skepticism is natural. Things grow even murkier when visual evidence enters the picture. At one point, Papoose and Remy Ma are seen on the same day, in the same location. Shortly after, the video disappears. No explanation, no clarification, just removal. And removal is rarely accidental. The timing alone invites speculation. Because once people begin comparing timestamps, locations, and narratives, silence becomes louder than denial. The internet doesn't need confirmation, it only needs inconsistency. This is where the analyst's perspective becomes unavoidable. Remy Ma, by most accounts, appears emotionally finished. Not angry, not dramatic, just done. The child remains the connection, not the relationship. Her energy suggests closure, not conflict. Clarissa, on the other hand, appears deeply attached. Emotionally expressive, defensive, invested. She speaks with intensity, loyalty, and protection, traits often mistaken for strength but frequently rooted in vulnerability. And then there's Papoose, consistently undefined, consistently uncommitted in language, consistently positioned to gain. He presents authority without accountability, protection without promise, presence without permanence. And Clarissa appears drawn to that, the calm, the control, the safety-adjacent aura of someone who never has to explain himself. That dynamic has a name, opportunism, not in the financial sense, but in the emotional one. Remaining where benefit exists, leaving when it doesn't, saying just enough to maintain access, saying nothing when clarity would cost something. And that is where heartbreak is born. Because when one person operates from emotion and the other from calculation, the outcome is never mutual fulfillment. It's delayed disappointment. The lesson here isn't about cheating, clout, or villains. It's about priorities. Clarissa believed in emotion. She believed in support. She believed in words and gestures. But Papoose's actions, his timing, his silence, his continued alignment with his wife and child, tell a different story. One of obligation over affection. Structure over spontaneity. If you want to know where someone's heart truly lies, you don't look at interviews. You don't look at captions. You look at holidays, at family time, at where they are when they don't have to perform, because that's where truth lives. And in this story, truth didn't need to be spoken. It was already visible in who stayed, who waited, and who was never fully chosen. By the time this story reaches its second act, something subtle but critical has changed. The silence is gone, not because clarity arrived, but because celebration did. For weeks, the narrative surrounding Clarissa Shields and Papoose existed in a gray area. Carefully worded statements, defensive explanations, timelines that blurred instead of sharpened. Every question met with dismissal, every concern labeled old news. And then suddenly, the tone flipped. What was once guarded became performative. What was once private became public. And what was once denied became proudly displayed. This is often the most revealing phase of any controversy, not when people explain themselves, but when they decide explanation is no longer necessary. Because confidence, when real, doesn't need spectacle. The shift begins with optics, luxury, laughter, affection in full view. At first glance, it looks harmless, even wholesome. A man showing up for a woman. Support made visible. Happiness documented. But context is everything. And when you place these moments against the unresolved questions still hanging in the air, the display stops feeling spontaneous and starts feeling strategic. This is no longer about whether something happened. It's about when it's being shown and why now. Clarissa has spent months asserting independence, emphasizing that she needs no one, that she stands alone, that no man funds her lifestyle or defines her worth. And yet, when emotional tension peaks, the imagery changes. Gifts appear, praise flows, cameras stay rolling, and the message subtly shifts from "I don't need anything" to "look at what I'm receiving." That contradiction matters, because when emotional validation replaces explanation, it often signals insecurity, not strength. At the same time, another figure remains noticeably absent from the frame, yet central to the truth of it all: Remy Ma. While Clarissa's world becomes louder, Remy's remains quiet. No public sparring, no clarification posts, no counter-narrative, just silence. And silence, when consistent, is rarely accidental. It suggests resolution or detachment. Observers close to the situation have noted this contrast. One woman amplifies emotion, the other withdraws. One performs connection, the other maintains distance. That imbalance is telling, because emotional energy doesn't flow evenly here. Clarissa appears emotionally invested to the point of defense. Papoose appears comfortable, praised, and publicly celebrated, without ever defining the relationship in clear terms. And Remy Ma appears finished, tethered only by shared responsibility, not affection. That triangle creates a power imbalance that no amount of luxury can mask.
2 years next year in September. We at the end of the year. Some of this stuff is just so old. You know, it's so old to talk about, to bring up, to keep harping on it. It's like they're separated. She got somebody too. Mm-hmm. Like, don't act like it's just over here. Mm-hmm. Like, she's happy, we're happy, and that's it. Like, I don't know what.
Is it cordial though? Is it cordial, or are you just?
It was corny. It's always corny to do social media shit. You know what I'm saying? Who wants that? Who wants to be a part of the circus? So I just felt like it was corny.
On the surface, this moment is framed as joy, as affirmation, as proof that everything is fine. But beneath the praise and applause, the subtext tells a different story. Because love that needs constant validation often isn't secure. And when gifts are highlighted more than boundaries, something is being compensated for. This is where the analyst's lens becomes unavoidable. Papoose's role throughout this entire situation has remained remarkably consistent. He does not deny. He does not confirm. He does not correct. He allows narratives to form around him while staying just quiet enough to benefit from all of them. That is not passivity. That is positioning. By never fully committing to one version of events, he maintains flexibility, emotional access without accountability, affection without obligation, support without sacrifice. Clarissa, meanwhile, appears drawn to what that represents. Stability adjacent authority, protection without exposure, the illusion of certainty in a situation defined by ambiguity. But ambiguity always has a cost, and that cost is usually paid by the person who feels the most. This becomes especially clear when you examine timing. At one point, Papoose and Remy Ma are seen in the same location on the same day. The video surfaces. Then it disappears. No explanation. No denial. Just removal. That matters. Because removal implies awareness. And awareness implies risk. If nothing about that moment conflicted with the narrative being presented elsewhere, the footage would have been irrelevant. But instead, it vanished. And once something is removed, speculation replaces silence. People began asking questions that never received answers. Why now? Why erase it? Why allow one narrative to grow while another is quietly buried? And that's where the opportunist label begins to stick. Not because of money, not because of fame, but because of emotional leverage. An opportunist doesn't need to lie. They only need to withhold, to let others interpret, to let emotions run ahead of facts, to benefit from devotion while staying detached from consequence. Clarissa appears to have invested emotionally under the assumption that reality would eventually align with her belief. That Remy Ma was already in the past. That public acknowledgement would follow private connection. But reality has a way of correcting assumptions. Because legal status still matters. Family priorities still matter. And silence, when maintained long enough, becomes its own answer. The hardest truth in this story is not betrayal, it's misalignment. One person operates from emotion, another from obligation, another from advantage. And when those three forces collide, the outcome is always the same. Heartbreak for the one who believed. This is not a cautionary tale about fame or clout. It's a lesson about reading actions instead of words. About watching where someone goes when cameras aren't present. About noticing who they choose during holidays, family moments, and unguarded time. Because that's where loyalty reveals itself. Clarissa Shields supported publicly, defended fiercely, believed deeply. But belief, when not matched by commitment, becomes vulnerability. And Papoose's greatest advantage may not be what he gave, but what he never had to give at all. In the end, love wasn't denied. It was simply never fully chosen. This is where the story stops pretending. Because by now, the facts don't need to be argued. They've already spoken. Quietly, consistently, and without mercy. At some point, every narrative reaches a breaking point. Not because someone confesses. Not because a receipt drops. But because the contradictions become too loud to ignore. And in this case, the contradiction is devastatingly simple. One woman believed she was being chosen. One woman already knew she wasn't. And one man never corrected either of them. That is the real scandal. For months, the public watched Clarissa Shields defend a story that never fully existed. A version of events where timelines were flexible, labels were optional, and legal reality could be replaced by emotional certainty. She spoke with conviction, with loyalty, with the kind of passion that only comes from someone who has already invested their heart. But conviction does not equal truth. And loyalty, when unreciprocated, becomes exposure. Because while Clarissa was explaining, protecting, and justifying, Papoose was doing something far more dangerous. Nothing at all. No clarification. No boundary setting. No public correction. Silence became his strategy. And silence, in situations like this, is never neutral. It is power. Let's be clear about what this actually looks like in real time. A married man allows another woman to publicly speak as if the marriage is already over, without ever correcting her. He allows her to refer to his wife as an ex, while still legally married. He allows speculation to grow, narratives to form, and emotions to deepen, all while remaining comfortably undefined. That is not confusion. That is control. Because control doesn't always look aggressive. Sometimes it looks calm. Sometimes it looks polite. Sometimes it looks like letting someone else speak while you benefit from the result. And that's exactly what happened here. Clarissa wasn't chasing clout. She was chasing certainty. And she mistook silence for reassurance. Meanwhile, Remy Ma did the most dangerous thing of all. She disengaged. No emotional reactions. No social media warfare. No public pleading. Just distance. And that silence told a completely different story. Because when someone is emotionally done, they don't fight for perception. They don't compete for narrative. They don't explain themselves to strangers. They move on quietly and let reality catch up on its own, which it always does. The turning point wasn't a post. It wasn't a gift. It wasn't a statement. It was a moment that disappeared. A video. A location. A shared space on the same day. And then deletion. That's when the internet leaned forward. Because deletions don't happen unless something needs to be hidden. Not erased, just delayed. Long enough for the conversation to move on. Long enough for emotions to cool. Long enough for people to forget what they saw. But people didn't forget. They noticed the timing. They noticed the overlap. They noticed who was where and who wasn't supposed to be. And suddenly, the old news excuse collapsed. Because if the story was truly over, there would be nothing to hide. This is where the opportunist label stops being speculation and starts becoming pattern recognition. An opportunist doesn't promise forever. They promise presence. Just enough to keep someone invested. Just enough to keep doors open. Just enough to avoid accountability. Clarissa gave emotion. Papoose gave ambiguity. And Remy Ma gave silence. Only one of those three paid a price. The tragedy here isn't betrayal, it's imbalance. Clarissa believed love would eventually force clarity. But clarity never came. because clarity would have required sacrifice. And sacrifice was never on the table. This is why the gifts mattered. Not because of their value, but because of their timing. When explanations fail, performance begins. Luxury becomes distraction. Affection becomes spectacle. Joy becomes proof. But proof of what? That someone showed up with bags? That someone smiled on camera? That someone felt momentarily validated? None of that answers the real question. Who is chosen when no one is watching? And the answer has been consistent from the start. Family, structure, legitimacy. Everything Clarissa was told not to worry about turned out to be exactly what mattered most. This is the part people don't want to admit. Clarissa didn't lose because she loved too hard. She lost because she loved someone who never intended to choose publicly. And the man at the center of this never had to lie. He simply let everyone assume. That is the most dangerous manipulation of all. Because when someone allows you to build a future in your mind, while they quietly maintain a different present, the fallout is inevitable. And the fallout is happening now. Not through lawsuits, not through confessions, but through realization. The realization that silence wasn't protection. It was permission. Permission for Clarissa to believe. Permission for Remy to disengage. Permission for the public to speculate. And permission for Papoose to walk away untouched. This isn't a love triangle. It's a case study. A case study in how emotional investment can be exploited without ever being acknowledged. How public support can be accepted without being reciprocated. And how a woman can be left defending a story that was never fully hers to tell. The most painful part? Clarissa didn't imagine the connection. She imagined the outcome. And that difference is everything. Because connections happen. Feelings happen. Moments happen. But commitment is a choice. And in this story, that choice was never made. Not publicly. Not privately. Not when it mattered most. The verdict isn't that Clarissa was foolish. The verdict is that she was hopeful in a situation that only rewarded restraint. And hope, when placed in the wrong hands, becomes heartbreak. This is why this story refuses to die. Because it isn't about gossip. It's about recognition. Recognition of how power actually moves. Recognition of how silence functions. Recognition of how easily emotions can be leveraged when one side stays undefined. And most importantly, recognition that believing someone wants you is not the same as being chosen. In the end, no one had to expose anything. The story exposed itself. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. This is the moment where the story stops being entertainment and starts feeling uncomfortably real. Because behind the posts, the gifts, the interviews, and the carefully chosen words, there is one brutal truth no one can spin away. Emotions were invested where commitment was never guaranteed. And when that happens, the fallout doesn't arrive loudly. It arrives slowly, quietly, and painfully. Clarissa believed she was standing in truth. She believed loyalty would eventually be rewarded with clarity. She believed that silence meant protection. But silence, in stories like this, is rarely protection. It's delay. It's avoidance. It's power disguised as calm. And while one woman defended, explained, and emotionally showed up, another woman stepped back, not because she lost, but because she already understood something others didn't. When someone is truly finished, they don't argue with the narrative. They let it collapse on its own. This isn't about who loved harder. It's about who had more to lose. Because the most dangerous position in any relationship is believing you're chosen while the other person is still deciding. That's where heartbreak is engineered, not by lies, but by half-truths and unanswered questions. What makes this story tragic isn't betrayal. It's imbalance. One side led with emotion. The other led with control. And the one in the middle never had to take responsibility for either outcome. So before you take sides, before you defend personalities, and before you dismiss this as old news, ask yourself one question. If everything was clear, why did it need so much explaining? And if everything was over, why did so much have to be hidden? This is not just gossip. It's a warning. Because when love is real but priorities are not aligned, the ending is always the same, and the silence after is louder than anything ever said. If you see it now, you won't unsee it later.